Not long ago, I talked about a game that had aged beautifully. Techland managed to create the video game equivalent of an expensive wine or Sigourney Weaver, but they weren't always this talented when creating zombie games. Before Kyle Crane, before Volatiles, and before that sexy synth soundtrack, there was Dead Island.
Things that go bump in the night.
What the? Jesus!
Me?
Jerk.
Sam B. Okay.
Dead Island released in 2011, immediately garnering attention and notoriety thanks to its teaser trailer depicting a tragic end to a family vacation. Dead Island is a weird game to talk about. It's a game full of good ideas with poor execution, and it's kind of in that state where people look back on it and go, yeah, I loved Dead Island when I was a kid, and then you go back and actually play the game and think, did I like this game when I was a kid? Or was I just hopped up on cheap energy drinks? This game feels like Techland looked up the phrase mixed bag and said, okay, and made one of the biggest mixed bags in video game history. Like any game, Dead Island has its fans, and I used to be a fan of this game, but then I had a sip from the Dying Light cup, and once you try it, you can never look at Dead Island the same. Sure, at the time it was good because there was nothing else, but now it kind of feels outdated and lacks an identity. When a game is almost unanimously known for a song that appears right at the beginning, rather than its gameplay, surely that can't be a good thing. This is a problem the entire series suffers from. Since the original came out, it seems like the subsequent sequels and spin-offs were trying to forge a new identity, and yet they all feel equally unpolished and boring. But did things have to be this way? Maybe if we take a closer look at the original and try to figure out what went right and wrong. Mostly wrong though. The story follows 4 completely polarizing characters, all with unique professions and backgrounds, and are either really unlikable or just uninteresting. Unlikable sounds harsh, but when you think about it, you really can't convince yourself to care about any of them. The most we get from characterization is in their opening bios, rather than throughout the story itself. Logan is an ex-football player, and was, and still is, a bit of a pisshead. His alcoholism led to him crashing his car into and killing a woman, which meant he could no longer play football. Trying to revive some form of his celebrity, he agreed to be the face of Benoit's blood drive campaign. A little bit ironic considering he killed someone while driving. Also, he thinks he looks like Matthew McConaughey.
Voted the sexiest Texan in 2004. Man, I beat out Dennis Quaid and Matthew McConaughey for Christ's sake.
Logan, you're clapped. Perna is an ex-cop who was discharged after beating up a nonce, so now she's a security guard for the Benoit Hotel, which we see in the opening cutscene when the unnamed protag lets his intrusive thoughts win. She is the de facto leader of the group because she has a couple of brain cells, unlike Logan and the next guy. Sam B is probably the most recognised and popular character from Dead Island, and it's all 100% thanks to his song, Who Do You Voodoo, because Sam has nothing else going for him, literally. He's a one-hit wonder who failed to make anything significant after his hit song, so he came to Benoit to make a quick buck.
Say the line, Bart!
Voodoo, you voodoo, bitch! Hide your kids.
Shen is the last protag of the game. She was training for the Hong Kong police to honour the memory of her dad, but instead of getting proper firearms training, she was sent to Benoit to spy on wealthy Westerners. Not sure what dirt the Hong Kong police are trying to uncover on rich guys. Just seen some rich guy hire out 12 prostitutes. Well done, Shen. Excellent find. After selecting a character to play as, you awake in a hotel room and discover the hotel is completely devoid of life. Then a mysterious voice tells you to get out of the hotel before the dead come for you. You barely manage to run to a side room and lock the door, but it's not enough to save you. Luckily, a bloke called Cinemoy comes to your rescue, and despite clearly being beat up and bit by zombies, you haven't turned. After saving Cinemoy from a group of zombies, the same mysterious voice from the hotel says that he can get you and Cinemoy off the island if you can reach him, but unfortunately, you lose connection, and Steve Blum is forced to shred his vocal cords.
You there, mate? Hello? Hello!
The main plot of Dead Island is all about the 4 immune survivors getting to this nameless man so you can escape, but getting there is more complicated and convoluted than it first appeared. The game is split into 4 main areas: the resort, the slums, the jungle, and the prison. But before I jump the gun, I need to talk about how you progress through these places. It's by doing quests for useless and ungrateful survivors. Once it becomes clear that you're immune to the virus going around turning people into zombies, Cinemoy seeing dollar signs essentially uses you to get shit done for his group of survivors, like getting them a new house, finding them food, getting them fuel, and other odd jobs here and there. You can't do this by being nice to the zombies. You've got to crack a few skulls to clean up the island. Each of the main characters can level up and have multiple skills they can acquire to make them stronger. Since the characters don't have much going for them in terms of interesting character arcs or likeable personalities, the game had to find a way to make them feel slightly different, so each character specialises in one of the 4 main forms of combat. These are blunt weapons, bladed weapons, firearms, and throwing weapons, which technically isn't even a type of weapon weapon because almost every weapon can be chucked at an enemy, but they had to get it in there for Logan. I chose Shen, who specialises in bladed weapons, because I love slicing up horrible bastards. Dead Island is open world. You're able to explore the island of Benoy at your own pace, looting every beach condo and talking to the same copy and pasted character model over and over again. Each character has 3 skill trees, one dedicated to combat, another dedicated to survival, and another one dedicated to this game's unique game mechanic that I'll speak more on later. Even though each character specialises in using certain types of weapons, you are free to use whatever you can get your hands on, and there's a surprisingly large weapon pool, all with different stats and levels of lethality. The rarity of an item is represented by its colour, with white being the absolute worst, piece of shit you wouldn't kill your worst enemy with, then it goes green, blue, purple, and then you reach gold / yellow / maybe orange. I think I might be colourblind. How you get these weapons is really up to you. You can find them lying around, get them after completing a quest for someone, or you can just buy them from vendors, like this fine gentleman who's began his beautiful transformation into a box.
Where the hell did I put that?
Each location in the game is fairly large, and while you can run to and from each quest, like a tit, you're better off getting in a car. Cars can be found pretty much everywhere, meaning you're never really in any danger of getting stranded in a sea of zombies. Combat is a big pulling factor for Dead Island. Slashing, smashing, and shooting zombies is surprisingly satisfying. That's not to say the combat is perfect, which is a running theme for Dead Island. Now that's pretty much covered everything I like about the gameplay. In fact, this is almost everything I enjoy about the game. For some reason I've seen quite a few people say that Dead Island has aged well. From the gameplay to the story to even the visuals, everything has aged beautifully according to some of these people. All I have to ask these people is,
Are you having a laugh?
I'm not sure what version of Dead Island these people are playing, but the one that I played was buggy, boring, and ugly. These accusations are very strong, so I'll do my best to explain myself. The quest system of Dead Island is one of the dullest I've experienced in a zombie game to date. Most, if not all of the quests in the game require you to get something for a survivor. What that something is varies, but it's usually either alcohol, food, or a personal belonging for said survivor. There's nothing wrong with having simple side quests to pad out your game. Most developers are guilty of doing this, but it becomes a problem when every single side quest feels exactly the same. I get that some of them are designed this way so you can get items from these people.
I'm gonna need some empty whiskey bottles, vodka, whatever. There should be some. I need some empty whiskey bottles, vodka, whatever. I'm gonna need some empty whiskey bottles, vodka, whatever.
This man clearly has some form of alcoholism. Other side quests have you find fuel and food supplies for nearby settlements, which are just copy and pasted throughout the game. For some reason, survivors are obsessed with juice.
You might need a car to get it all back.
Here you bloody go, mate. Here's your juice delivery. The lack of interesting side quests means it feels like a chore when you're trying to level up your character, which is an issue in a game that requires you to level up as enemies become increasingly stronger. Quests aren't even carried by NPCs because all of them are so uninteresting. The only interesting one was this guy, who changes voice actors halfway through his quest.
Very defensible. Unfortunately, it's surrounded by those infected freaks.
My satellite phone was also unfortunately destroyed.
Another thing that really bugs me about this game is just how ugly it is. The visual style of Dead Island really hasn't aged well. Certain styles don't crack, but Dead Island's fucking shattered all over the floor. It's not like they spent countless hours on different character designs either. This dickhead shows up about 50 times throughout the entire game, even with an Asian accent at one point.
They have her in a warehouse by the pier. Everything I own is there. They took it all.
Either this pasty white guy was raised by Asian parents, or he's just doing a racist accent. The most diabolical of all the quests in the game are the ones that require you to escort survivors. The word escort is triggering for me for a number of reasons. I seemed like I was glazing the combat before, but don't be fooled. I like elements of it, but there's some mechanics that just make it tedious. Some of the abilities that have been implemented to make you more effective against zombies are actually more of a hindrance. Sometimes you'll be attacking an enemy no problem, and then all of a sudden your character forgets how to swing properly, which almost always leads to you taking damage. Some of the zombie attacks as well are so overpowered, and I'm not even talking about the special infected. How can a single hit from a normal biter do that much damage to me? My guy were literally the same level. The most disappointing mechanic has to be Fury. Though Sam, Logan, Perna and Shen are immune to the virus, it does seem to have one significant effect on their bodies. Like my dad after his favourite footy team loses, the player can activate Fury, which increases movement speed and damage for a short period of time, allowing you to plough 3 waves of enemies in seconds, or at least that's what's supposed to happen. What ends up happening is you take a shit ton of damage because enemies can still hurt you no problem, and since hitting enemies is a bit iffy anyway, you almost always take loads of damage. Not great when a tool that's supposed to make you the big bad to zombies makes you arguably more vulnerable. The only time it's kind of useful is during the early game, because late game you have a shit ton of broken weapons that 1 or 2 hit enemies anyway. Despite my gripes with Dead Island mechanically, I have to say that the strongest part of the game was the enemy variety. I actually really love the designs of the special infected. Yeah, the normal zombies and infected aren't much to write home about, about, because they're just slow and fast zombies, but the other less common infected really are freaky. Thugs are probably the most annoying special infected, as they're just normal zombies, but stronger, and they have a bigger knockback effect when they hit you, but they still have a concerning appearance and force you to come up with another way of killing them instead of just fighting them head on. My favourite technique is throwing a propane tank at their feet, shooting it, and watching them fly to the moon.
Yes!
The next infected type might get me into trouble if I say its name on YouTube, so I'll just call it by its Dead Island 2 name, Burster. Yep, can't get into trouble for that. Bursters are haunting bastards, because apart from exploding like giant fleshy landmines, they cry out for help too. What do you need help with, fella? Want me to help you move a couch? Floaters can be found in sewers, much like the other kind of floaters. They're fat and they spit at you. That's about it. These next two infected are the best in the game when it comes to freaking you out. Rams are the biggest infected you come across, and their stature is really something to be marvelled at. They're strapped in straitjackets, meaning their only form of attack is to ram you, hence the name. Rams can soak up a lot of damage and their only weak spot is on their back. I think what makes these guys so terrifying isn't really their size, but the horrible noise they make when they run at you. Butchers are the real stuff of nightmares. You don't encounter these guys until late into the game, but they still manage to leave a lasting impression on you. They make you think twice before deciding to fight a horde of zombies, as they can slice you up like a sirloin steak. The problem with the gameplay is that it's not necessarily terrible, it's just boring. There's a lot of good ideas here, just with poor execution, and thankfully we got to see these ideas blossom in Dying Light. But let's not focus on that game. We've got to get back to the incredible story of Dead Island. After running out of options and food, Cinemoy asks the gang of non-infectable dickheads to travel into the town to see if there's any more food, and to see if they can find a way to this mysterious voice who is promising them salvation. Getting into town will be dangerous, so the gang decides to acquire a truck from the hotel and get it armoured up by a local mechanic. After defending his workshop from a gang of fast bastards, the truck is all set and the gang get ready to head out, but the mechanic asks them to take his daughter, Jin, as he has been bitten. Logan, being the kind and understanding fella in the group, tells him no, but thankfully the mechanic manages to convince them by threatening not to give them the keys.
Look at me. Look at me. I love you. And this is how I want you to remember me.
You know, this scene would have been a little more upsetting if the characters actually showed a little bit of emotion. The gang makes it to the town and they help defend a church that's housing survivors. Inside they meet the leader of the group, Mother Helen.
You won't find much unless you know where to look. I will help you.
Hey lady, you sound really familiar.
You see, breathing the fumes is one thing, but drinking the liquid is something else entirely.
Oh god, not again. The mother, Helen, says that the church's water supply has been switched off by some bandits and asks you to politely ask them to leave. The gang do just that, and Helen explains that they have no food to spare, but to try and find some in the richer part of the town. Unfortunately, the only way there is through the sewers, because the rich knobheads blew up the bridge to stop the infection. You make it through the sewers and stumble into Rich Lad's HQ. Here the police and Benoit's most wealthy have sanctuary, but unfortunately they don't have any food to spare either. Logan loses his head again and basically says that they should cut and run, leaving Cinemoy and the other survivors behind.
Oh, fuck the lifeguard, man. If not for him, we wouldn't be stuck here like this.
He literally saved you. There's a word to describe Logan, but I can't say it as it'll probably get me demonetized. Just know that it rhymes with these words on screen. Logan calls Jin to tell her that they're bugging out, but she refuses to leave the people at the church, and threatens to take the car and leave the gang if they don't help. You'd think that this selfishness would eventually leave the group, because it keeps biting them in the arse, but it never does. With no other choice, the group agree to help supply everyone, except the gang in the police station. Screw those guys. After getting a tip on where to find some food from a generic NPC, you raid a nearby market that's been taken over by some thugs. No, not those thugs, just some bellends with guns. Once you liberate the food, you head back to the church, only to find out that Jin ignored you and went to give them supplies. Shockingly, she gets kidnapped, and a bloke called Joseph gets gunned down. Luckily, these guys are no match for our four courageous, nope, definitely not courageous, unhinged, yeah, we'll go with unhinged protagonists. The gang find a very distraught Jin, and Logan and Sam B decide now is the best time to berate her. I'm quickly going to interject in the retelling of this god-tier story with a hot take on the protagonists of Dead Island. Does anyone really like these people? I'm genuinely curious, because in my opinion they are some of the most awful, uninteresting and inconsistent protagonists I've ever seen come out of a zombie game. Sam B and Logan are the worst offenders. Sam B and Logan start out acting like dicks and remain at the same level of dickishness when the credits roll. Perna and Shen land in the area of dull. Though they aren't complete twats like the other two, they have nothing memorable going for them. I guess you could make an argument for Perna having somewhat more of a fleshed out personality, as she actually takes centre stage during the cutscenes, but there's rarely a moment where you go, wow, what a profound video game character, please put her in the next Smash game. Techland didn't even let the player get to know them when they interact with the NPCs, as all you do is accept quests from them while they talk at you.
Whatever you want.
Yes. Yes. Definitely. Yes. Sure. Yes. 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 Yes.
Anyway, back to the story. After getting Jin out of the police station, the heroes head back to the lifeguard tower with food for Sinamoi and the other survivors. While they're at the lifeguard tower, Sinamoi tells them that he's had no luck getting in contact with the mysterious voice on the radio, so tells you to go back to the hotel to see if the antenna there is any good. After finally reaching the radio, you once again have a chat with this voice. Turns out he's on a prison island and he's a fella called Ryder White, a colonel with the BIDF, and that stands for Benoi Island Defense Force. Ryder explains that the super sick armoured car you've worked so hard to get won't get you to the prison island. You need to find a guy called Moen, and he's somewhere in the jungle, but you can't reach the jungle area so easily. You have to destroy the entrance to an old bunker, and this leads you to the next part of the game. Ryder tells you to ask Moen to get you to a nearby lab, as your blood could be used to make a cure. Ah, he seems like a sweet guy, that Ryder. Turns out Moen isn't home, but his second in command asks you to do some odd jobs for him. Sounds simple, but the job involves you taking down an entire armed militia. After killing these guys, you commandeer their boat and head off to find Moen. Unfortunately, Moen doesn't know how to get to the prison, but he does know where the zombies are coming from.
A place where they do ugly experiments with God's creatures. This is where the corpses come from. This I know. You wanna go?
No. Why would I want to go there? Well, the plot forces you to go there anyway, and you end up stumbling upon a research lab deep in the jungle. Dr. West has been conducting experiments on some natives who have been infected with this mysterious virus, and asks to take blood samples from each of the 4 protagonists. West explains that the virus originated within one of the tribes native to Benoi, one of the tribes that practiced cannibalism. Guess it's just another day for those guys then. West asks the survivors to retrieve a mummy that has infected tissue, and find a non-infected woman from the tribe called Yerima. Before you can make your way to the prison, Jin and Moan suggest that the boat needs upgrading if you're going to make it through the minefield. What does this upgrade entail? Maybe some tougher armour? Or a built-in turret? No, even better, a couple of rusty poles. I guess this gives the game the excuse of making us go back to the workshop and having Jin put a zombie dad out of her misery. You make a quick trip back to the lab, and it's gone to shit. Zombies are everywhere, and Yerima is the only survivor. Dr. West was a bit naughty and tried to drain Yerima's blood, and accidentally opened some zombie cages, forcing Yerima to lock herself in one of them. After that traumatic experience, the gang grab the prototype vaccine and sell to the prison. Oh, I guess those poles were a good idea after all. Nice thinking, Moen. After getting into the prison, you meet what's left of the prisoners, led by a kind-looking fellow called Titus. Titus loves his tattoos and guns, and wants you to help arm the prisoners so they have a better chance of defending themselves. Okay, mate, you're taking the piss now. Can't you just leave me alone? You eventually go along with this plan, raiding ammo caches and lockers for Titus, but once Ryder gets in contact with you, he tells you to forget about helping the prisoners. Seems a bit dangerous leaving your friends with a bunch of prisoners, especially a bunch of prisoners you've decided to blow off. And this turns out to be a fatal mistake for our pal Moen, who dies saving Jin and Yerima.
They tore into him like hungry animals, and all we could do was watch.
Rest in peace, King. You all managed to escape into an elevator, and it was at this point Jin decided she would be in charge and headbutted me to death. After getting on the elevator, gas begins to fill it, and you all fall unconscious. A forgettable NPC you met earlier called Kevin wakes you up and explains Ryder double-crossed you and took the sample. He was never interested in helping the people of Benoi. He was only concerned about curing his wife. And even though I will admit that he's a piece of shit, that's pretty sweet of him. After fighting your way through a shit ton of zombies, you make it to the roof of the prison, where you're met with Ryder's very own militia. Bro is that petty he's not willing to give us a lift on his helicopter.
Emily and I are flying out of here, and you'll stay behind with no bloody chance of escape.
Alright mate, no need to rub it in. Plot twist, he and Emily won't be bloody escaping this island, because the boys roll up on the helipad to stop him. Seems Jin's got a case of main character syndrome as she hits Ryder with a speech. Unfortunately for Jin, she is not on the playable roster, so that speech ends up getting her killed. Ryder gets bitten by his wife, quickly forgets that she exists, and injects himself with the cure, and turns into a freaky-looking zombie who can do mixed martial arts. Ryder is defeated, and the remaining survivors make it off Benoi with Ryder's helicopter, capping off this blockbuster story once and for all. Until it's eventually continued in Riptide. But do I feel like playing that game? No. Dead Island can be recognised as a stepping stone for other open world zombie games to follow and learn from, but that's about it. Dead Island is like a jack of all trades, master of none kind of game. The kind that you pick up and play through once, and forget almost everything from the experience. It's one of the most inoffensive zombie games out there, and I can't tell if that's a good thing or a bad thing. So many of Dead Island's aspects are passable at best. I mean, maybe if your favourite meal is plain chicken breast and rice, then this might be the game for you. Dead Island hasn't aged well at all. And you don't even need to look at the games that came out that same year. You can go back 5, 6, even 7 years before, and still find games that are as great as the day they came out. The difference is that there's plenty of games that do exactly what Dead Island does, but better, even excluding Dying Light, which is essentially a reboot of these ideas. You can still find zombie games that are better, zombie games that have much funner gameplay mechanics, zombie games that have an engaging story, zombie games that handle the open world so much better, and zombie games that are actually fun to play through over and over again. All of these other games have something about them that makes them memorable, and all Dead Island will always be remembered for is a song and a completely misleading trailer. And I swear to God, if I see that bird again, I'll throw myself out of a hotel window.